Recognition, power, and influence is your birthright, and this podcast shows you how to get there. Welcome to episode number 248. Today's episode, I'm interviewing Sara Taylor. Sara is the author of Thinking at the Speed of Bias: How to Shift Our Unconscious Filters. Now, you know from my podcast and the work that I do with clients that I am often pointing out what I would consider to be obvious to me, but not always obvious to you, all of the different ways that we have bias, both bias against ourselves, but, more importantly, bias in the workplace that's working against us when it comes to getting the recognition that we already deserve. And in this conversation with Sara, she really breaks down how and why and where that unconscious bias exists in each and every one of us. And through her work through diversity and inclusion, she has come up with very specific tools that not only can we work with ourselves to overcome our own personal biases, but we can begin to recognize those biases in others, which gives us an outlet to begin to work past them. I'm so excited for this episode and all of Sara's wisdom. I think you're going to enjoy it. So let's get started. Welcome to Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and I teach you how to get promoted, get paid, and bring your whole self to the leadership table. I am on a mission to change organizations from the C-suite out, because women are the new face of leadership, and we are doing it on our terms. Hello, corporate badasses. Welcome to another episode of Women Changing Leadership. I am your host, Stacy Mayer, and super excited, as always, to be here with you again this week. And today, I have a really incredible guest for you who has written a book about the unconscious mind and how it affects our biases in the world. And as you know, I am often coaching my clients and talking on this podcast about the understanding of bias. And for many of you, you're like, yeah, I know. I experience it every single day, and it's very obvious to me. But I think being able to also understand our own bias and how we see ourselves and how we view our interactions in the world is a huge component in our ability to be successful. So when I came across Sara's work, I was very excited to have her on the podcast and share her wisdom with all of you all, and to really learn more about what's kind of happening behind the scenes, what's driving the bus, quote unquote, in how we make decisions. And then, of course, how our leaders around us are using bias for us and against us. So thank you, Sara. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you, Stacy. I am so happy to be here and so happy to be with your listeners as well.
Yeah. So let me give a formal bio and then we'll dive into the conversation. Sara Taylor is the president and founder of deepSEE Consulting and has 35 years of extensive experience in diversity and inclusion, serving clients locally, nationally, and globally. Her new book, Thinking at the Speed of Bias: How to Shift Our Unconscious Filters, offers a clear set of competencies, skills, and strategies for addressing unconscious bias. By adopting these practices, individuals can enhance their personal effectiveness and organizations can create more equitable outcomes and transform their cultures. Thank you again. So, Sara, I always like to start out with my guests about your own personal secrets to success. How did you get where you are?
I think some of it comes from a little bit more about my background. I could say 35 years as a DEI practitioner, but before that, I am the youngest of 10 kids, grew up on a farm. And so that meant getting up at 5:30 from when I was like 7 or 8 years old, getting up at 5:30 in the morning, doing chores before getting ready to go to school, doing chores after school. It meant always thinking about driving to the work that needed to be done and also thinking about what needed to be done for the family, the family farm, for the group, for the community, if you will. And I think, certainly that work ethic from the farm is still with me today. And also, my parents were, because I'm the youngest of 10, they were a couple of generations actually older than me. And so they very much had the strong community, strong sense of we have to give to the community, we have to give to others. And I think so much of that is still a part of me today. I probably work myself too much to the bone, but it's about giving to the world, helping to make this world a better place. The mission of my organization, in fact, is really helping people to see more broadly, to see the full world around them, the full differences around them, and to be their most effective selves.
Yeah, because I was looking at SEE, all caps, right? So I thought there's got to be something to this word see. And I appreciate that, because what you're sort of sharing with us is this ability to instill from your parents, this like the world is bigger than us, right? And as you were talking, I was like, oh, do you have any tips for me as a parent to get my kids to fold laundry, right? But I think that this idea of seeing, and so could be a place to start from, right? Because I do realize that living out here in Berkeley, California, as a privileged family, right? Like we don't see anything bigger than our little world, right? And my little kids, and they're young. Of course, everything's about them. But you're talking like 5 years old, you realize that not everything was about you, right? And it was bigger. And so, yeah, I appreciate that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And you're right that C is important, but it's not about ocular vision. I mean, that's a portion of it, but that's not why we capitalize it. We actually capitalize it because it's an acronym. It is see, explain, and evaluate.
Okay.
And it helps us understand how our unconscious filters work. So a number of years ago, probably about a decade ago now, I coined the terms frames and filters to talk about the ways that we identify. How do we describe our identities? And then also, how do our minds perceive differences in others? So frames are those differences that are objective, that we can easily observe. You see right away, for those that are seeing the video, you see that I'm a white woman. You see that I'm middle-aged, 57 to be exact. If I were standing, you'd see that I'm 5'7". You see my mannerisms. You see my body shape and size. But that's about all. That's objective. Everything else that you're seeing and perceiving about me is coming through filters.
Okay.
Filters are an automatic mechanism that operate in our unconscious, that take in exponentially more information than we can ever be conscious of. And in fact, let me get at that and give you an actual statistic. We'll see if your listeners can maybe guess. We'll give a pause to guess. How many pieces of information do you think our brains take in just 1 second?
I was like going to go with thousands or something, but I was just
actually millions.
Millions.
11 million. 11 million pieces in just 1 second. But here's the second part of the question. Of the 11 million, how many are we conscious of? And that's just right. And then maybe a few more after caffeine, right? Actually 40.
Okay.
So what does that mean? Where does all the rest of that go? It's absorbed by our unconscious filters. That's their job, to take in all of that information. And then their second job is to categorize it, analyze it, explain, and evaluate. That's the second part. So SEE, see, explain, evaluate. See is what's objective. Explain then is what our filters do. They take in that information and they categorize, they explain it, all based on that warehouse of information. And then they attach a value judgment and evaluation. See, explain, evaluate. So our filters are doing the explanation and the evaluation. And then guess what else they do? They decide our thoughts. Just think about it for yourself. What's your next thought going to be? You don't know. We know from brain researcher Benjamin Libet, we don't know what our next thought will be because that thought is formed milliseconds before in our unconscious by our filters. So you put those three together. Our unconscious filters are taking in exponentially more information than we can be conscious of. They're evaluating and explaining all of that. And then they're deciding our thoughts, our decisions, and our actions. So incredibly powerful, yet the vast majority of us are unaware of them.
Right, exactly. And it seems like exhausting. So as you're talking about, it's like split second, and then what do we got right behind it? Another second, and then another second. And then we're processing so much information at such a rapid speed that you, of course, are going to go into default, into autopilot, right? To be able to make those decisions, right? This is like to be able to function in society, right? Because otherwise we're just like, I don't know what to think. And so I could see this like adding that awareness piece even before the decision is made could interrupt it somehow. So talk to me about that.
Exactly. In fact, I talk about the very specific order of that process.
Okay.
So we know our filters create our thoughts. And then what do our thoughts create? Our actions. Now, of those three steps, if you will, which one could be missing in any given interaction? It's the conscious thought. Our filters are so powerful that they can drive our behaviors. They can drive our actions without us even thinking about it. Or we have what I call the passive conscious process, where our conscious mind just kind of serves as a rubber stamp. Okay, our filters just decided, okay, that's what we're doing.
Right.
What we need to do instead is have an active conscious process. So before, it's in between the filter and thought. That's where we got to really get involved before that thought creates an action. So we've got to stop and we've got to check and challenge our filters before we do something with that and weed out, if you will, the biased information, the ineffective information, the partial information. We need to weed that out before we move to a decision. And I'm going to relate that back to, again, I call them the three functions, what I went through real quickly before. Our filters are designed to take in exponentially more information than we can be conscious of. Can we control that? Not really. Can't control that stuff. Then they explain and they evaluate. Where is all that happening in our unconscious? Can we control that? Nope, can't do that. It's in that third step that we can intervene. Our filters create our thoughts. That's where we have to intervene. We have to get involved in between the filter creating our thoughts and check and challenge the filters before we allow it to create the action. That's the active conscious process.
This is so good. I was thinking about something as you were talking, right? So we're preaching to the choir right now. And I was a yoga teacher for some time, and this sort of actually led me into the work that I do today. But I vehemently did not want to teach yoga at a yoga studio. And the main reason for that is because there was access to this work, right? Like I was like, I want to teach yoga to people who don't have access to this work, right? I want to teach people the ability to think about this. And so when you were talking, right? And so let's see the two different applications of your work, which is when you're preaching to the choir, right? So everybody who's listening to this would love a more conscious world, would love to have less bias, would love to have, and they're already doing the work on these filters, right? Like they're bringing so much, so they're like, I'm trying so hard. I definitely want to relate. I definitely want to make conscious choices. I definitely want to intervene. I do not want to perpetuate this world that isn't working for me, right? And then you also have the client, I'm sure, that is the person who's like, maybe you get hired to intervene on their behalf or something, like to show them kind of what's going on. But since our audience is essentially the other, right, which is the people who are already doing this work, they're trying to bring some awareness to it. What's kind of the missing piece? And I have some hypothesis based on my work with clients that they're not recognizing within the unconscious mind, which is like maybe some filters for the aware woman. Like, yes. Say, like we're already awoke, essentially. We're aware. We get it. What else is getting in our way?
Yeah, I'm going to interject another question as a part of that. And that is, if so many of us have that positive intent, why aren't we making progress?
All right.
Right?
Ooh, I love it.
The reality is what we know from research is that 99% of us have a mismatch between that positive intent, very, very high, but we don't have the ability to meet that intent.
Wow.
And that ability comes from cultural competence, an ability to be able to see how our unconscious filters are operating, an ability to check and challenge them to then shift our behavior. So I am sure your folks, anybody that's listening is going to have positive intent. There's not going to be anybody that's listening to this that says, oh, no, I really like inequity.
Yeah.
It's going to say, no, I like being ineffective, or I really like being a jerk. No, we have positive intent. But what we also know from cultural competence is that only a small percentage, in fact, only about 2% of individuals are able to see and respond at the level of filters, the level that we need. It's a stage of development that we need to be able to be our most effective, to be able to match that positive intent with an equally positive impact. So they are actually stages, just like any other competence that we develop. How many times have we seen leadership competencies as an example? Or take a hobby. I want to get better at tennis. I can go to a tennis court and pick up lessons, and they're going to have beginner and beginner plus and intermediate plus and advanced and so on, right? Specific stages of development. The same is true with this. We literally need to develop. How much can we see how our filters are in control? And what we know, once again, from an assessment that measures that cultural competence, and millions of folks that have taken that assessment, is that about 85% of us are operating in the first 3 of 5 stages, which are the ineffective stages.
Oh, wow.
So 85% of us don't have the ability to first see filters, and then second, respond more effectively based on those filters. And then, so you have that, the lack of competence, and you have that together with the other factor of we all have positive intent, and we think we're more effective than we actually are.
Oh my God, that's so good. This righteousness that women have, and I'm not saying this, I don't want you to be like, well, I have this right to be righteous, but she's getting to that point, which is like when we can have that humility to say, hey, I'm probably, chances are operating in the 85%, then we can really lean into what we don't know. We can say, okay, I don't like the way this person is behaving towards me, right? Like, I don't mean that you can't work against that. And that other person's bias, conscious or unconscious, is affecting you and how you operate in the world. But then to be able to meet that with the willingness to go into that remaining 2 competencies, to be able to say, hey, I'm willing to look at this differently. I'm willing to explore something, because chances are, just by default, I'm in the 85.
Yes.
Yeah.
And, here's the other thing that you're really touching on. As women, we live in a male-dominant world. And so we have a different experience based on that identity.
Mm-hmm.
Our identity-based experience as women, we are able to see continually when our filters aren't the dominant filters.
Oh yeah, like every and like it's right.
So that's the thing. And remember, we all have so many parts of our identities. And so many times when we are a part of the dominant group and when we're a part of the non-dominant group. But just for me as an example, as I mentioned, for folks that don't have the video portion here, I'm a white woman. And so I'm a part of the dominant group when it comes to race, and I'm a part of the non-dominant group when it comes to gender. So when we are a part of the non-dominant group, it's real easy for us to see when we're a part of a filter-driven meeting, a filter-driven organization, a filter country and world. It's easy to see when we, as the non-dominant, we've got to swim against the current, right?
Right.
But when we are a part of the dominant culture and we're swimming with the current, we can't see it as easily.
Right. Yeah.
We don't notice that the current is swimming with us. Why? Because our filters align with that current.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's when we miss it. The other thing to kind of touch on back to the stages of development is when I talk about the stages of development, it's not about, do I experience oppression or not? No, that's not what it's about. That's not what it measures. Have I experienced marginalization or not? No, that's not what it measures. What it measures is, can I see how my unconscious filters take in others?
Wow.
And can I then shift my behavior based on their filters to be more effective?
Is this an assessment that we can take? Is this available?
It is. It is. Yes.
What is it?
It's called the Intercultural Development Inventory.
Okay.
You need to, it's not an assessment that I own, but I do proctor it. So you have to go to somebody who is a qualified administrator like me in order to get the assessment. So if folks want to, contact us at deepSEE Consulting and we'll hook you up with that assessment.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yeah. When I taught in women's leadership, we would do an unconscious bias assessment. It was like a very brief assessment just to kind of get this conversation going, right? Because it was so important to recognize and to be willing to work within our own personal unconscious bias, right?
Absolutely.
To be able to, yeah. So as you're talking, and we've already identified millions of, it's not thoughts that are coming in per second, but millions of
pieces of information.
Pieces of information. Yeah. Yep. Millions of pieces of information per second. One thing I have learned from watching my children learn how to play piano is that you cannot play the entire piece all at once as you're learning it, right? So she breaks it down into sections so that they can bite it off, right? And so as you're talking, I'm already like, oh my gosh, this is so much, right? So I know in your book there are strategies, and we are aware that we have unconscious bias. Maybe we're aware of some of those biases. What can we do? How do we break this down?
Yes. So our process, and if you'd ask any cultural competence expert, they'd say, well, if you want to develop, you have to do 40 hours of intentional development work. That's a lot. And, what you do is you go through all kinds of different differences and eventually you develop. And, I did that for a number of years. And what I realized is people had the same struggles. And they also, once they got through those struggles, they were able to develop. So I thought, well, why don't we just teach that? I call them key developmental shifts. And when we did that, we were able to reduce the developmental process from 40 hours down to just 9.
Oh, great.
Yeah. So those key developmental shifts all roll up into 3 big buckets. It's first see self, then see others, and then see approach. So I need to start with myself. What are my filters? Then, what are the filters of others? And then finally, what is that approach? And again, remember, when we're saying see, we're not talking ocular vision. We're talking about that acronym. See, explain, and evaluate. I'm always checking and challenging my filters, checking and challenging my filter perceptions of others, checking and challenging my filter perceptions of my approach. So how do we do that check and challenge again is with that active conscious process. I'm continually second guessing. I'm going to assume different from what my filters are telling me. Assume that others are different from me and that they have different filters. That's what helps to at least get us started in this process. So much more in the book. And so I hope that folks will tune into the book to get more information.
Yeah. So I just thought of something with like negotiation. Something that hit me is that women just automatically ask for less than men, right? Like, I mean, you could just say that's true. It may be. And when I operate from that as an assumption, like if I just say that and I say, oh, well, it's not true, or maybe I'm trying to prove my worth, or maybe, maybe it's not always true, or like if I'm going to argue with the truth of it, then, and the specifics of it, then I'm not really benefiting what it is, which is that I feel like I'm getting paid what I want to be getting paid or whatever, right? Like if that's my goal, right? And so when I, sometimes I'll just tell clients like, look, let's just basically assume you're not asking for enough. And then like kind of add 10%, right? Like, let's just like get that out, right? Like, it doesn't matter. We don't even have an argument over the like specifics of how much less you're asking or whether or not it's always true. And so some of what I'm hearing from you is this like basic assumption that we're all operating at a deficit. And, even in my own family where the children like look up at me and they actually look like me and then they kind of say things exactly like me, I connect with them better when I operate from the basic assumption that they don't have the same worldview as me, is that they're not thinking the same things, that I have a filter in how I see them. I connect with them better. Like it works, right? Like if I just assume.
Yeah. And because why? When we do that, we've got to stop and think then. Well, if I assume that my worldview is different, well then, what is that worldview?
Yeah.
And that's the active conscious process. We're not just going to have a passive conscious that just lets us dictate our behaviors.
Right.
We're going to think, if they're different, how?
Right. So we mentioned briefly the people who aren't as willing or interested in doing this work. And I know that you actually worked as a diversity consultant inside of organizations as the chief diversity officer and so on. And I know that a big challenge with that type of work is, again, where we've got the people at the organization who are on board with it. Then we have the people at the organization who think that they're on board with it, but their actions don't match their words. Like maybe it's more from a marketing perspective, or everybody else is hiring a chief diversity officer, so we should too. And then we absolutely have the people who are like, look, I'm a very important person. I've got a lot of work to do and I don't have time for this, right? So how do we get others on board with this work? What have you seen has been the key, the key to helping support other people to be more open and aware?
Yeah, absolutely. What's so interesting is each one of those personas, if you will, that you just listed, we can understand through their stage of development.
Oh, cool.
Just think about it. Because what did you describe? You described their behaviors and their mindset, which is what comes from our stage of development. So if you've got folks that think that they're doing what they need to do, but they're not, that's a reflective of that gap that we talked about, right?
Yep.
So that's what needs to be addressed. Or if you have folks that are actively resistant, we know that there are those folks. Why do we need to be hiring more women anyway? I mean, seriously, they never work out anyway. They're not foreign leaders.
See, I told you so. I know. I'm like, oh.
That's actually reflective of the second stage of development.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
So what we need to do is, once again, we've got to understand these stages of development and how they show up in our organizations. If we want to be more inclusive, we have to develop this ability to be more inclusive. If we want to be more equitable, we have to develop that ability. And so overall, it is really helping people understand no matter what your interactions are every day, however positive or negative you feel about them, it's all based on your stage of development and how much you're able to take in your filter's involvement in those interactions. So even for your own effectiveness, for your own enjoyment of life and the workplace, figure out what stage of development you're in.
So good. I was just thinking about, you want to challenge them. It's like, make it about their work productivity or their ability to be more effective. And, like you said, like 85% is ineffective, right? So that's so good. I love that. So I want to talk a little bit more about you personally. So in your own development with this work, have there been any surprises along the way? I suppose it could be also with the client, but anything that's kind of like you were shocked or different than what you expected when you set out to do this work?
Oh, gosh, so much. Because, I've got 35 years of experience as a DEI practitioner. And frankly, I didn't know what the heck I was doing when I started. I had no idea. And, one of those shocks when I was a chief diversity officer, I was pretty young in that leadership role. I reported to essentially what would be considered the CEO of the organization and fairly young. And, I get complaints from one particular department in the organization that, there's racism in our department. And so young and naive that I was, I'm like, oh, well, let's just tell the boss that there's racism in this particular department and we're going to investigate it. So that was one of my, young and naive shocks of, wait a second, you can't just say this is what's here because not everybody is seeing it.
And they're not going to see that statement through the same lens. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in organizations, when we want to shift the culture, we can't just say, we're going to point it out and we're going to shift it. We have to be strategic. I chalk it up to being young and to that huge intent impact gap. I really wanted to do well. I really thought I was doing what I... Yes. But I didn't know the actual actions that I needed to take in the organization.
Yeah. And this is your second book as well, right? So any other insights or things that have come up? I know this newer book is brand new, right? But anything you've learned that has further developed this process for you?
Well, overall, anything that I've learned is really come through the daily work with clients. My job is essentially to develop people, even if it's in creating a DEI needs assessment or a DEI strategy. It's all done for the purpose of developing the individuals and the organizations. And so it's just continual learning. And this book just adds more learning and more tools that we know work. And everything that is in the book is all proven tools. We know that they work. So, my mom, again, she was the mother of 10 kids, farm woman, right? And she loved to cook. She would always say, oh, you're my guinea pigs. I'm trying out a new recipe. And so I think about my mom often. The clients that we've had over the years, many times are our guinea pigs. And the result is we've got a proven recipe when we write it down in the books. So folks get the 5-star rating when they pick up the book.
I appreciate that. That's so good. So as we wrap things up, I'm curious if there's anything else that needs to be shared. So my women are, looking to make a bigger impact at their organizations. They're looking to have more influence. They're looking to be more effective leaders, but also to really get recognized, right? To have, that seat at the table, that voice at the table. Any other advice that we haven't mentioned today that they can take to heart and put into action?
I would say 2 things, and both of these I go into more detail in the book too. We do all have, we may say, well, I don't have that leadership role yet, or I don't have quite the decision-making power yet. Nonetheless, we all contribute to equity or inequity every day. So understanding how that can happen. And the other piece might not be as popular, but to know that I actually, think about that 11 million pieces of information again. every second, I might actually be taking in stereotypical information about me.
Mm-hmm.
I might be taking in, I mean, I'm living in this world. Of course, I'm not only taking in stereotypical information, I'm taking in actual information.
Yeah.
I look at a picture of all of the presidents of my country, and what do I see? Men.
Right.
I look at the vast majority of Fortune 500 CEOs. What do I see? Men. So I'm taking in both factual information as well as stereotypical information that tells me I shouldn't be a leader.
Right.
You know what? Even if I've got the best of intent, that filter might seep through when I'm making decisions about the women on my team, the women that I am thinking about promoting. And that's where I also have an opportunity to contribute to equity or inequity.
I had a woman, I was so thankful to be able to sit with her in this thought, which was best candidate is a woman. And she was like, I don't want to hire them because of what everybody else is going to think. And I was so thankful that she was able to actually tell me that, right? Like, so first of all, we just don't hire that person because of what everybody else is going to think unconsciously. Mm-hmm. But then I really just said, hey, okay, like, yeah, they might think things, like you might think things. You even had this thought that you might not hire her, right? Like, it's like, yeah. And can we move forward with that? Can we just move forward through this place of like, I don't know.
Absolutely.
Right. And she did. She moved forward and actually she preempted it and had very direct, open conversations with leadership about this woman's qualifications and why she was bringing her on board. And, that forced her to grow.
Yeah. And you know what I would also love to see in a situation like that is after giving all of that, all of the reasons, all of the qualifications, to then say, and had I hired a man, I don't think I
wouldn't even be doing this. Oh, I got goosebumps. Yes.
Yep.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your work, Sara. I'm so appreciative of you. And please go out and buy your book and give it a 5-star rating if you so choose. And any other ways that you want to connect with my audience?
Yeah, absolutely. LinkedIn, Sara Taylor, also deepSEE Consulting. Connect with us there. You can also get a sense of our podcast. I'm not going to take you away from your podcast, but you can add ours to the list as well. So both deepSEE and LinkedIn are great places.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. So appreciate it, Stacy.
Before you go, I have a question for you. Do you know how close you are to your next promotion? Really? Not what your boss has told you, not what you even believe to be true, but have you actually taken the time to sit down, take an assessment, review the 5 categories that it takes to get promoted into senior executive leadership positions and decided where you fall in each category and given yourself a ranking on a scale of 1 to 10 of how close you are to getting your next promotion? Have you done this? Well, now's your chance. If that feels interesting to you and you're like, hey, I want to know exactly how close I might actually be or how far away you might be and what it's going to take to get you even closer, then I invite you to take my promotability quiz. This is a quiz that I put together with practical tips that actually tell you where you're lacking and where you're winning. What are the areas that you actually need to improve and not necessarily what your boss is telling you all the time so that you can take concrete steps towards landing that next promotion and changing the face of the leadership table. Go to yourpromotabilityscore.com to take your free assessment today. Yourpromotabilityscore.com and let me know how it goes.